You make these mistakes too? Well, my students here at the University of Tasmania have been learning the German language for only around 7 weeks. And I've just marked their first quiz and, well, there are 5 mistakes that most people commonly make. Let's find out if you make them too and get ready because we've got a couple of quizzes for you too. Grüß Gott, hallo, ich bin Billy Badger und das ist Bausteine 1. Herzlich willkommen. Okay, 5 or maybe more common mistakes. Let's count them down. We'll start with what is probably, I'd say, the most common mistake. It's this: getting the verb in the wrong position, especially when starting sentences with something other than the subject. Here are some examples of what happens. This is Friday night, so we say am Freitagabend. And since we were at a concert, a lot of people often want to continue on like this. Am Freitagabend, wir waren auf einem Konzert, which translated into English sounds okay, doesn't it? On Friday night, we were at a concert. But we know it's not, because in German, our verb has to be in the second position. So it might seem like you're asking a question. The subject and the verb need to swap around here. Like in this example, here are our elements, unsere Bausteine. There's us, there's the verb we want to use, how we get around, and where we are. Let's start like this, in Wien. The very next thing has to be the verb first so that we have it in the second position, and then we just slot everything else into place. In Wien fahren wir oft mit der Straßenbahn. We've got a frequency word and an adverbial phrase that describes how we get around. And this brings us to our next common mistake, which is linked to the last one, and it's putting commas in weird places. In English, we seem to put a comma in any time we're having a think about what to say next, so it's maybe no wonder we often see beginners coming up with sentences like these. Am Wochenende wir machen unsere eigenen Nudeln. So this is, of course, totally wrong. First, as we can see, our verb is in the wrong position because it's over there in the third spot, which is never good. And secondly, there's absolutely no need for a comma in this sentence. The only time you use a comma like this is when you ask somebody a question or answer one with yes or no. Ist das deine Lieblingshenne?
Ja, das ist meine Lieblingshenne.
Otherwise, the only time I'd recommend using a comma is when you are separating sentences with some kind of conjunction, like in this example. Wir gehen am Freitag zum Markt, denn es gibt immer etwas Leckeres zu essen. Our next most common mistake has got to do with pronouns now. As we know, we use pronouns to talk about people when we don't want to always use their name, but we also need them for talking about things. The problem is, of course, that everything is just an it in English, but in German, even things have genders. Now, we've got Christina back to give you a quiz. We'll ask you what you think about these things that we're going to show you, using questions like this, for example. Wie findest du mein neues Hoodie? You'll answer like this: Ich finde es schön. Substituting in the right pronoun for the thing that we're talking about and making some kind of assessment with one of these adjectives. Off we go. Los geht's.
Wie findest du diese Landschaft? Wie findest du das Boot? Wie findest du den Strand? Wie findest du die Stadt? Wie findest du die Schnecke? Wie findest du den Kuchen? Wie findest du das T-Shirt?
All right, how did you go? In all of these examples, the thing we are commenting on is the direct object, so it's in the accusative case. That means we need to use these pronouns. Did you get this right? Well, this brings us to the next most common mistake, not using the dative. Well, not using the dative in the right place. At this stage in the semester, my students haven't really learned the dative yet, but they still want to use sentences that require the dative. And it's hard to avoid because the dative gets used for a lot of things. Let's make a list of them so we know where we have to be on the lookout. And I'd say the most important one that catches people out is when we're thinking about location. Now, anytime you're talking about where something happens, you need to use the dative. Here's some examples. Hier bin ich am Fluss. Hier sind wir in der Stadt. Hier bin ich in den Bergen. But we also use the dative with all kinds of prepositions, like these ones. And my students often got caught out by using mit, although actually they hadn't learned it yet. And here I am with my wife, Christina. Now, a lot of people would just say, hier bin ich mit meiner Frau. But we need the dative, so we need to say, hier bin ich mit meiner Frau. And actually, we've already had an example with mit a little bit earlier. In Wien fahren wir oft mit der Straßenbahn. Again, we can see we're using the dative. Of course, we use the dative for a few other things, so check out this video if you want to get the full list. This brings us then to our next most common mistake. It was with adjectives. You've probably watched this video, so you know all about them, but let's remember that there are two ways of using adjectives. We can use them like this or like this. And when we're using them in front of a noun, we always need some kind of adjective ending. And some of my students forget and come up with sentences like these. Das ist ein kleiner Hund. Das ist eine blaue Straßenbahn. Of course, each of these are dreadfully incorrect. We need some endings, and what this ending is will depend on four main things: the gender of the noun, the case we're in, what sort of article we're using, and whether the noun is singular or plural. Well, let's get Christina back to give us a quick quiz. I'm going to show you a number of things. Christina's going to ask you what I've got, and it's going to be your job to describe what you think I have using a sentence that starts with er hat, he has, and then you'll finish the sentence off with an indefinite article, the adjective you see on screen, and the name of the thing I'm holding. Sound easy? Let's go. Los geht's.
Was hat Billy? Und was hat hier? Was hat jetzt? Und was hat jetzt? Und was hat hier?
Okay, I've just remembered another common mistake that people often make. This one's a bit more advanced, so let's see if you make this one too. Here's a multiple choice question for you. If I'm talking about something that I've been doing for quite a while, like maybe making these videos or climbing or running, then what tense do I have to use? Is it the present tense? Is it the simple past tense? Or is it the perfect tense? Or maybe even the pluperfect? Well, is it this, or this? If you guessed the present tense, then congratulations, that's exactly right. Anything that we started doing in the past that we're still doing now is just in the present tense. Now, if you want to find out more about the different tenses, you can read about them here in Bausteine eins, and I'd recommend you watch this video next. Danke fürs Zuschauen. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Auf Wiedersehen und tschüss.